The Qoo10 situation might look confusing as it's looking to be wind up, but it's actually very simple. Here's a complete summary of everything so that even a 5-year-old will understand. So, there's actually a very logical explanation of how Qoo10 has gone from one of the biggest e-commerce platforms in Singapore to what it is today. And yes, it's kind of due to this guy. In fact, if you watch out to the end, you'll all make perfect sense, and you'll look more like a Korean drama than a failed business. But before anything, we need to explain what Qoo10 is, in case there are skibidi people who think that Shopee invents e-commerce.
Skibidi.
You see, back in the days when we everything, and before influencers get their offline blue ticks by appearing in the Shopee app, online shopping was as messy and as risky as eating laksa while wearing a white shirt. Retailers would set up their own online stores in their websites, as there were no platform for them to sell their goods online. Back then, there were only platforms for consumers to sell to consumers, kind of like Carousel. However, it wasn't simple. Most were online bids, and in Singapore, it was mainly Yahoo Auction and eBay. Then Qoo10 came in to save the world. They were just like Shopee but in the website format. And trust me, as someone who has been through that period, Qoo10 was a bomb, yeah. You can find everything there, and I'll even go on the limb to say that it was Qoo10, not Shopee or Lazada, that made people in Singapore believe in selling and buying through an online platform. After all, remember, Amazon was already in the US, but the presence wasn't strong in Singapore then. So, what you might not know is that Qoo10 actually did continue with this until September this year. Yeah, even if you are already Team Shopee or Team Lazada, or if you want to be more atas, Team Amazon, there's actually still a Team Qoo10. It was only in July this year that it got into the news for all the wrong reasons, and slowly things started to decline. So, what the heck happened? For that, we need to look at two parts of Qoo10's history first, because without it, this will not make sense. Back in 2000, a platform called Gmarket was established in South Korea. It kind of worked more like Carousel plus eBay lah. In 2009, eBay, back then a giant that's trying to get as much market share in the world, bought Gmarket for USD $1.2 million. That was when the ownership and its branding changed as often as Taylor Swift changing boyfriends. But long story cut short, it eventually rebranded as Qoo10 in 2012 and raised funds from many investors in 2015. To be specific, they raised USD $82.1 million, whereby one of the investors was the then Singapore Press Holdings. Okay, so everything seems fine, right? They are just building their war chest to fight incoming competitors like Lazada and Shopee, which was launched in 2014 and 2015 respectively in Singapore. So, for the next few years, the battle began as usual, with all the platforms aggressively acquiring both merchants and consumers. And it was a very tough fight. Do you know that back in the days, Shopee had almost no seller fees? Those were the good old days when companies fought to change our habits, which is why now I have to grab to work every day even when there's no promo codes. But you get the idea. While we the consumers might not see the fight, it was obvious in the back end, where companies were burning through money just to gain market share. While Shopee and Lazada continued to engage influencers to dance and pay stupid websites like woodifeed.com to write articles for them almost every month, Qoo10 has a different strategy. Qoo10 went on the buying spree of other e-commerce platforms instead. Back in 2019, they bought ShopCubes, an Indian online marketplace. They then started to buy more, and usually they won't change the company's name into Qoo10, but just hold on to the company. But their big ticket purchases started in 2022 when they bought Qoo10 in 2022 and We Made Price in 2023. Both are South Korea online marketplaces. Now, it should be noted that they also bought some other businesses, but those might not be relevant here, so just remember that they bought the two major South Korean businesses. And then, in early 2024, they bought Wish for USD $173 million in cash. Yes, remember that point, in cash. You see, Wish is a very popular US-based online marketplace that works like Qoo10. In fact, it was so popular, it was the most downloaded e-commerce app back in 2018 and was the third largest e-commerce platform in the US based on sales. Unlike Amazon, it usually focuses on super low price and low quality items from China. However, it declined as fast as it rose, as it lost many users throughout the years. This is especially so in 2022 when Temu entered the US market. You see, Temu is creating quite a big hoo-ha in the US. It's like Shopee, but it spends lots of money on marketing, and it gains so much market share that if you ask someone in the US where they buy the cheap chopsticks to grab snacks from, they'll say it's from Temu instead of Wish. So, when Qoo10 bought Wish, everyone thought that Qoo10 is going to show Shopee and Lazada that the correct way to grow is to buy companies, not to get Ronaldo or Jackie Chan to dance for you. But no, that was where hits the fan. You see, you won't know that Qoo10 is in any trouble before 2024. In fact, when news broke that they were buying Wish in cash, we all might have this impression that Qoo10 is doing very well. Usually, companies will buy over other companies with both their shares and cash, so using full cash to buy a company is not common. But given that Wish is a listed company, it has to be done that way lah. Now, what you might not know is that other than buying Wish in 2024, they also bought AK Mall, a Korean online platform, for about $500,000 Singapore dollars. So back then, even I was convinced that soon we'll be seeing this creature everywhere. In fact, let me review an insider's info. Back in early this year, they even contacted Qoo10, my stupid parent company, for sponsored content. I mean, it all look perfect from the outside, right? But it's actually similar to Qoo10's Instagram account, whereby she looks so happy living her perfect life with Tan Ziwei, but in reality, she's crying every day. While there were already rumors that Qoo10's payments to merchants had somehow become tardy back in 2023, that was attributed to a technical issue, which was apparently resolved. But it was in July 2024 that we finally know how serious the issue is. The cracks started to surface from July 2024 and it started off once again as a technical issue. Now, just a refresher, remember, Qoo10 has bought many similar online platforms and two of which are in Korea are Tmall and WeMadePrice. And just for context, Qoo10 is a Singapore registered company, though those brands operate in Korea and have offices there. So, in early July 2024, about 500 merchants claimed that they didn't receive payment from WeMadePrice since May 2024. The total amount came out to be about USD $26.6 million as reported by the authorities on 11 July, or USD $2.9 million as mentioned by WeMadePrice CEO on 25th July. Back then, they claimed that it was a glitch in its payment system and that they will complete payments by the end of July. But by mid-July, it was reported that even Tmall wasn't paying. And with that, the Korean authorities immediately sprung into action, investigating and monitoring the situation, as major merchants also started to leave the platform. Finally, in end July, the founder and CEO of Qoo10, Kwang, was summoned for an emergency hearing with the South Korean government because the situation has gone out of control. It's estimated that there are now about 60,000 merchants in WeMadePrice and Tmall who will not pay. It got so bad that the South Korean authorities even offered loans to affected merchants so that they could tide over the situation. So, what did the Qoo10 CEO tell the Korean government? This time, it's not about some glitch or technical issue. Instead, he admitted that Qoo10 had temporarily used funds from WeMadePrice and Tmall to buy Wish. Yes, the Wish that Qoo10 bought with cash in February this year. However, he said that the money has since been returned. Now, remember, this is what he told the government. So, like that, everything should be okay, ma. He then said that within 30 days, he'll find the money to pay the merchants, saying that he will use his personal assets or even selling his stake in Qoo10 or use it as a collateral to borrow money personally just to save the business. So, all this happened in South Korea. Is Singapore affected? Not yet. During this period in Singapore, Qoo10 is still operating as usual, so we might not know what has happened. After all, WeMadePrice and Tmall aren't household names here, so we thought that they are completely separate from Qoo10. It was only in late August that it's reported that Qoo10 has been retrenching people in its headquarters, which is in Singapore, since mid-August. By the end of August, over 80% of its staff has been reportedly let go, most of them Singaporeans. And soon, reports of Qoo10 in Singapore not paying their merchants surfaced. In mid-September, it's reported that the Singapore police are investigating Qoo10 after merchants lodged reports of non-payment from Qoo10. Now, several merchants have even gone to Small Claims Tribunal, a small specialized court in Singapore for people or companies to seek claims of under $20,000 through the court. In fact, these claims are still ongoing, because if you go through the Singapore court's hearing list, there are well over 20 ongoing cases as of time of this recording. Qoo10 then started to ghost everyone, including reporters who headed to their office. Later, on 23rd September, even MAS stepped in. You see, for Qoo10 to accept payment from customers or to send payment to merchants, they kind of need MAS permission. Kind of lah. So, it turned out that MAS has spoken to Qoo10 about the delay of payments to merchants since early September, but nothing was done by Qoo10. So MAS suspended Qoo10's payment services from 23rd September. And if Qoo10 wants to continue payment services, like receiving payment, they will have to use a third-party payment service instead. Kind of like using PayPal, since it's a third-party payment service. And I guess by now, you should know that that is the beginning of the end. In early October, Korean prosecutors requested an arrest warrant for the Qoo10 CEO, Tmall CEO, and also WeMadePrice CEO. They are afraid that the CEOs will destroy evidence and flee. In addition, they also suspected that Qoo10 might have misused money from WeMadePrice and Tmall to buy Wish. However, the court denied the arrest warrants for them because there's a low probability that they will flee or destroy evidence. Before we can wonder if Netflix is going to buy over the story rights of Qoo10, the final nail in the coffin came. Remember, throughout the whole saga, Qoo10 is still a live company, but soon it might not be. You see, when the company is suffering from so many debts, they can either declare bankrupt and creditors won't be able to seek money from them while they slowly find ways to return the money, or they win up, so the assets can be sold off to pay off the debts. For winning up, they can win up themselves, or the creditors can apply for them to win up. Of course, creditors can also take the usual route of suing them for the whole money, but in Qoo10's case, several companies apply for them to win up. And we are not talking about small money. One of Qoo10's creditors said that they own them over $72 million. With so many creditors, the High Court in Singapore approved the winning up application by a creditor, which is supported by 6 other creditors, and therefore ordered Qoo10 to win up. This means that no matter what, Qoo10 must die sell off all their assets to pay off their debts, and then after that, close down. In other words, this time is really the end for Qoo10. So, what's next? If you go to Qoo10's website, it's almost like nothing has happened. However, a liquidator has taken over the company, so they'll be trying to pay off creditors whatever assets they have.
What happens when Qoo10 is liquidated?
What?
It becomes a liquid.
So, if there's one story you must learn, it's this: no matter what, if you see a beautiful couple on Instagram, just think of Qoo10. And I'm not saying because I'm jealous and I'm single like cheeseburger forever. If you find this video both entertaining and informative, watch this to know why Singapore used to have Primary 7 and Primary 8. And thank you for spending almost 10 minutes with me. I really appreciate it.